Welcome to the Helping Families Be Happy podcast, where we explore the often messy world of family, love, and relationships. I'm your host for this podcast, Adina Oberman, a mom, author, former preschool teacher, picture book lover, and member of the Familias marketing team. I'm also the creator of Big Books for Little Hands, a site dedicated to connecting parents and teachers with the best books for the ups and downs of life with young children. We welcome today's guest, Melissa T. Shultz. Melissa is a writer and editor whose work has been published by the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Dallas Morning News, AARP's The Ethel, Ladies' Home Journal, Parade, Newsweek, Reader's Digest, and many other publications. She is editor-at-large for Jim Donovan Literary and the author of From Mom to Me Again, a memoir/self-help book, and also the upcoming book, What Will I Do If I Miss You?, which is her first children's book. This episode aligns with the Familias habits, talk together and learn together. You can learn more about the Familias 10 Habits of Happy Families by going to the Habit Hub blog on familias.com. Welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
We're very excited to have you here to talk about your latest book, which is great for families, especially as we head into the back to school prep season. So can you tell us a little bit about your book, What Will I Do If I Miss You? And maybe a little bit of the inspiration behind the story.
Thank you for asking me to join you today. I can tell you a little bit about the book, What Will I Do If I Miss You? It's based on a true story and includes my son, Alex. And he had been at home with me during the day and was about to start this new plan, this new school. And he was feeling a little bit apprehensive. And like the character in the book, he actually asked me, what will I do if I miss you? And I remembered a friend telling me how comforting it can be for a child to know that parents and children are in each other's hearts forever. I loved that idea. So when I explained that to Alex by putting his hand over his heart, and so he could feel it beating, he delighted in it. And he took a lot of comfort in knowing that I was going to be there if he just put his hand on his heart. And he would know that I was there in his heart and with him at school, even though I wasn't physically there, by feeling the beat of his heart. So it was pretty simple and a no-cost tool, and certainly a heartfelt tool and way to know that you're never alone. As long as you're feeling the beat of your heart, you can feel the beat of your parents' heart and their love as well.
That little scene in the book is something that's so beautiful, and just a moment that, that moment that you shared with your son. I think so many parents, probably most parents, can relate to that feeling of separating from your child, maybe at the beginning of school or beginning of childcare, and wanting to reassure your child, but also how it feels for you. And I just love this idea of you can feel me with you just by listening to your own heart. I think there's so much comfort in that, and something that really empowers kids as they start the journey of being out of the home, being at school. It's so beautiful and it's so touching. Did that idea come to you or in the moment, or was it something that you came up with together? I know you said you hatched a plan, but was that sort of an idea generated from you or from Alex?
The original idea was, I'm a big fan of paying it forward as a parent. And when I had Alex as my first child, and so I always tried to connect with parents who had children at least a grade level above mine. And one of those women friends had told me that she had heard that just reminding that your child about the fact that you were always in each other's hearts was very comforting to friends of hers and her own child. And at that moment when Alex said what he said, I thought, oh, what can I do? As a parent, we want to be there and figure things out and find solutions, but we also want our children to be able to start learning how to do these things and comfort themselves. And so it popped in my head and I said, hey, let's put your hand on your heart. Do you feel it thumping some? And again, like the character in the book, he did. And so he went from having a very kind of concerned look on his face, and I don't know about this school thing and leaving the house kind of thing, to, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. And then his eyes got bigger. And I said, I've got my hand on my heart and I can feel you right now. So if we can both do that, what about this idea that, you'll know that I'm there and I'll know that you're there and we'll send this signal. And of course, I kept thinking of like Batman and the bat signal, and like it was a different kind of signal, but still a signal. And again, that was fun for him because it was almost a secret. It's almost a secret that he had and that we had together. So I think most children delight in those kinds of good secrets.
Absolutely. I think as you were talking about Batman, I thought you got to work with what you got when it comes to kids and those tough moments. And if Batman or whomever is the interest, that's the perfect way to go about it. This whole conversation is resonating so much with me because before I started working with Familias, I was a preschool teacher in a classroom. And for years, I was on the teacher side of helping kids with their separation process, the transition into school or the transition away from home into the next school year. And then when I became a mom and I had to experience it from the point of view of the parent, it was a completely different experience. Intellectually, you know that, but then until it's you and your child transitioning, it's so different. And I remember that my daughter's teacher in her 2-year-old class had a little rug in the doorway in the hallway. And she said, oh, this is the kissing rug. And so this is the spot where you have to give your grown up your hug, your kiss, your high five, whatever you want it to be. This is the special spot. And then you're ready to go. And just like the idea of holding your hand over your heart and feeling your heartbeat and knowing you're still connected to your parent, it was really empowering for my daughter to feel like, okay, I did this big kid thing. I went to the spot, I did the thing, and now I'm ready. And that certainly was helpful. I'm in the vein of paying it forward to other parents. Every day was not like that. There were certainly days where separation was better than others. And so I always like to be very real about that. But I think this whole conversation and this whole idea really resonates with everyone who's going to be thinking about their child, whether it's camp or even just leaving for the day when you haven't really spent much time apart. This book is really a tool that people can use over and over again, no matter what transition is coming their way.
Yeah, I hope people find it relatable. And I know that we were so lucky when you talk about being a preschool teacher or a teacher of any kind and watching children go through these transitions. I'm so impressed with what you do for families and for children as individuals. And we lucked out when Alex went to school for the first time. We had the most fantastic teacher and she completely got it. And I ended up talking to her and saying, hey, just so you know, I told my son about this technique. He's got worries about being off to school and I'm working full time. And I just don't want you to think he's having some medical crisis here with his hand on his heart. But if you see him doing that, just be aware that means he's trying to work out this feeling that he's got. And just a heads up. And it was helpful to her to know. So I definitely would suggest if you use this technique that you quietly let the teacher know, so that if they see that, maybe they can just provide a little extra assurance or a pat on the head or a smile or a hug. And they definitely did that with Alex. And as the week went on, and after his first week of school, he did, like the character in the book, stop putting his hand on his heart a little less often. Each day was a little less and a little less. At the beginning, apparently, it was quite a lot. But by the end of that first week, and certainly by the second week, he was feeling much more confident. And so was I then.
That's such an important point that you make, that this little conversation with the teacher, this little point of communication made such a huge difference, right? Like it made you feel better to know that the teacher understood what your child was working through, what you were working through, and how to relate to him in a really tough moment. And also think that it goes a long way for both verbal and nonverbal communication, which are such important skills that we're trying to build with our kids, at least the foundation of them, as they are starting to become their own little people, separate from how they are in the world of our home, and how to communicate those feelings and also to normalize
Being
how to
worried.
exactly and saying
Yeah.
this is a real feeling and maybe it's not the best feeling, but I can still communicate it and I have a strategy.
Yes. And even if Alex had not said anything to me about being worried, I think you don't know what your child's going to feel like when they approach the school or have that first day. I think it's such a natural thing to talk about that I think it's an idea that I would hope that everyone would consider whenever there's a transition, just as a sweet reminder that, you're going to meet lots of people. This is so exciting. This is going to be really fun. And just know that whatever comes in the course of a day, that I'm always right here in your heart, and remind them about that technique and feel the thump. And then as they recount their days, and every child does it differently. Some want to talk about things, some don't. But as that week goes on, it's an opportunity for you to check in with them, and actually in a sweet and fun way, so that it doesn't have to sound like you're expecting that anything wasn't any other than positive. And I remember saying to Alex several times, and it turned into a playful thing as those days went on, where I'd say, I felt you, I got your signal. Did you get my signal back? And so he ended up playing along with that, and that I know that he reached for his heart and he felt it. And he was delighted that I felt it too. And I really did. You really do imagine it then yourself. Oh, I'm getting the bat signal. I can feel it. Our hearts are beating. Everything's okay.
Yes, that's so true. It reminds me a little bit of how when my kids were really young, how I would say, okay, they're very high need right now. They really want me to hold them. And I fed them, I changed them. They're happy, they're clean, they're fed, but I really have to take a shower. And then I would go in the shower and think to myself, am I imagining them crying or are they really crying? Because you're so connected and you have those strong instincts about how your kids feel and how it makes you feel. So can you help us understand when you think it's a good time to introduce this technique and how to inform teachers about what's happening in terms of the strategy? How did you communicate that to the teacher?
I think now you have so many more opportunities. When Alex was little, we weren't doing a lot of emailing and there wasn't really texting to do. So it was more in person. And I just kind of pulled her aside a little bit on that first day. And it's a little chaotic on that first day, but I would suggest maybe just dropping them a little note if you can do that by email. Or if there's an opportunity where you're meeting the teacher before your child starts school, that's a nice way to just make it a quick thing so they know. In terms of talking to Alex, it was in the evening during a routine that so many of us have with our children, where you're already in that wind down mode and they're relaxed and more likely to talk. And he was getting ready for bed. He had had a bath. We were reading a story, and it was just a natural time to bring it up. And that gave him time to think about it, consider it, and be in a safe zone where he was in this space with me, where the routines are just so good for kids, I think. And he felt like he could say what he said, which is why I wrote down that line and all those years later wrote this book. But he said, what will I do if I miss you? And soon after he went to sleep last night, I took out one of those little books that a lot of us have to write down our favorite moments with our young children. And it went in the book because it touched me so much. And I was so proud of him for being able to articulate that feeling and feeling safe enough to be able to say what he was thinking. So that's why I think if you can do that in a space and at a time where it's not stressful and you're chatting and able to be there for each other, that would be my suggestion.
That makes a lot of sense. We want to approach our kids when it's quiet, when it's a low stress moment, when screens are off, so that they can really feel heard and you really get the opportunity to hear each other, which it seems like it really went a long way for you and Alex and can really go a long way for these conversations in an ongoing way. I know that over the years, there were always some kids who were raring to go on the first day of school, other kids who were really reserved and had fears. And I would always suggest to the parents, if you have the time and also if the school allows, visiting the classroom if you can before the first day,
Yes.
or coming just a few minutes early and checking with the teacher to ask if you can be the first one there, coming into the classroom when it's quiet and when there's not that much going on is a completely different experience than coming in when the volume is up and there's lots going on and play is already in motion. That can be, for some kids, just too overwhelming. So that was always something that I recommended. And I also used to love giving kids who needed help getting through the door a little special job that made them feel very important. So I would say, okay, I haven't chosen what color paint we're going to use at the easel today. Maybe you can be the one who chooses because I can't decide, or I don't know where I put the book that we're going to read today. Can you come help me find it in the library? And sometimes that little bit of responsibility makes kids sit up a little straighter and makes them feel like, okay, I got this. And
I agree.
Yeah.
And the technique too, it's interesting to me that I think it set a precedent for when both my sons ended up chatting throughout their school years, because it was like, you remember Motel 6 always said, leave the light on. I think it's something like, I'll leave the light on. The light's always on. And so I would work often at writing and editing at night. And I had my little light on in my little office in our house. And they would come in their PJs late at night when their head was filled with lots of thoughts and worries. And that's when they would speak to me. And it was very quietly slink in. And I link that back to those early conversations, like when Alex said, what will I do if I miss you? I think it started something.
It definitely sounds like it, because here we are on the other side, hearing about it and the impact it made, and now sharing it with the whole world and helping us as a company to help families be happier, make that transition to school or with any child's program a little bit easier. So it's certainly made an impact on us, and it will make on so many readers. So we thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Just so you know, that boy in the book, he's now a man. He grew up to be a man, and he very definitely knows that every beat of his heart serves as a reminder that he's loved. And I feel good about that.
Good. That's the point. We want our kids to feel good, and we want to feel good about the process.
I think this technique works on grown-ups too. I'm just saying, there's plenty of days when all of us could use that reminder. And
Oh, yes.
yeah, if you think about it, when you share that sort of technique and somebody, even a teenager going off to make a transition in high school or junior high school, going to a camp, I think you're never too old for that kind of a reminder.
Absolutely. I think we all need that sometime. As we begin to wind down, can you share where our listeners can find you online?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Actually, probably the best way to find me is at my website, and it's Melissa T. Shultz, and no C in that name. Blame it on my husband's father, but there's no C in that name. And melissatschultz.com, and all my social is on there as well. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have visits from you and chat back with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
As we conclude today's podcast, I'd like to thank Familius for their support in bringing this podcast to your ears and your heart. We'd be thrilled if you subscribed to the podcast and left us a review. And when you're ready for the next amazing book adventure, we'd be honored if you choose a book from Familius. One step at a time, we can make the world a happier place.